Hey everybody, Chris here from It's Me Made, and today is all about adding and removing supports in Cura. So let's go ahead and get into this video. So let's talk about adding and removing supports. And I guess let me step up on my soapbox first, because at the end of the day, when it comes to Cura and supports, I just feel like it's lacking. It's lacking in comparison to all of the other slicers, because a lot of the newer slicers, they have paint-on supports, and you can select them, and it's really easy to do. With Cura, it can be a pain sometimes. So if you're really wanting to just stick with Cura, I'm going to show you how you can add them and remove them. Now personally, when it comes to supports, and I have like a lot of things I need to support on a model, I sometimes will go to another slicer because of those advanced techniques. But if you're wanting to stick with Cura, I am going to show you exactly how to do it in this video. Now the first thing we need to discuss is our orientation. Our orientation of how our model is being put on our 3D print bed. Because there are certain models that are support-free, like this one. This is an actual support-free model, and honestly, anytime I can get a support-free model, I'm going to take it. But not all models are support-free. We have to support them to be able to 3D print them. Now, when I bring this model in, it actually comes in like this. And doing it like this means I have to have supports on the back of the head, the back of the arm, this back part right here, and that's just not very good. But if I orient the model in a certain way, it's not going to need any supports whatsoever. Now, this isn't always the case when it comes to 3D models, realizing that this is a bust and it's support-free, but I just want to show this as an example. Like, depending on where you're orienting your model is really going to depend on how many supports you need. And that's the big thing. When you have a model, if you position it in the right way, more than likely, you can remove a lot of the supports you're actually going to need to place. So, the first thing, let's jump over to Cura and let me show you some different techniques to be able to orient your model to be able to remove as many supports as possible. Because that's the goal. We don't want as many supports as we can get, we want the least amount of supports. So before we even get started, I just want you to see that I am in the most current version of Cura as of right now, and that is version 5.7.1. So if you do not have this version, it's time to update, and if you have a version that is newer than this, well, I am talking to you from the past. And another thing before we even get started, I am printing this on my FL Sun V400, which is a Delta printer. It's got a really big round base plate, and it can print really tall, and even better than that, it can print fast. So I'm going to be printing this stuff on that. That's why you see the round build plate. And the model I'm using as an example today is from Pixel and Plastic, and it is Louie from DuckTales. And the nice thing about this is it's already broken up into a bunch of pieces, so we can 3D print it and orient these models in the best way possible to remove any use for supports. Now, this is not going to get away with having no supports whatsoever, but for some of these, we might be able to figure that out. So before we even get started, I think it's really important for you to have a strong foundation and understand what all of the colors in Cura mean. So let's just take a second and let me explain this to you. Now, first we have yellow. Yellow means that is a 3D model. Now the next thing you're going to notice, if you have multiple models and you click on one of them, you're going to get this cyan outline right here. And that means that is selected. So that is a quick way for you to understand which model is actually selected. So you can see the difference here. Now, the next thing is understanding your first layer. So if we go up underneath here, you can see that we have this cyan right here. And this cyan means this is your very first layer. Now, if I would rotate this model, like let's say I rotate it a little bit like this, now you can see that this right here is going to be my first layer. And everything else right here is not going to be my first layer. Now, red means it is going beyond whatever your support overhang angle is. So I have mine set to 65. So if I come over here to my supports and I have support overhang angle, and you can see right here 65. Now, if I would change this to say 80, you can see it go away. Like, that means, okay, 80 degrees, I do not need any supports, but that is not true. I actually need them. So I would honestly say 50 would be my really safe support overhang angle. And you can see all of this would be red. Now, this is the really important thing to understand. When you see this red, that means you are going to have supports. So, every single time that you see red on your model, you know that you're going to need supports and you're going to have to check this. So now that we know the three main colors, let's go ahead and get into this. So first, let's just talk about our orientation when it comes to the best way to orient your model. Now, remember, we also have to deal with layer lines. So when we're dealing with a very soft gradation, like a dome right here, you are going to get a lot of plateauing. And let me go ahead and slice this and show you what I mean. So I moved everything to the side to just have this, and you can see right here, we have got a lot of plateauing right here, and you're going to see this on your model. That is one of those things that if you have these really subtle gradations, you need to consider that when you're 3D printing, because you can change the angle of your 3D print to accommodate that and not be able to have such a subtle gradation. Now, if we rotate that to where we're using the points right here, we could get rid of all of these support areas right here on the face. Now, we're going to add some on the back here. Now, a few of the things that we need to think about when we're orienting a model in a certain way is how can we remove the most supports possible? Or another question is, can we remove the supports from the area that is most viewed? So if I've got to have supports on this model, would I rather have it over here on the face everywhere, or would I rather have it on the back of the head? So we've just got to determine where do we want to put these supports. Because sometimes you have to make sacrifices because you can't get out of not having supports. You have to have them on some models, like this model right here. There's no way that I can get away with not having any supports whatsoever. But if I go ahead and I angle this around just a little bit, then I turn it back like this, now we can see, you don't see any red whatsoever. Now, if I look, I am going to see a lot of red right here now. So we have got to figure out, okay, is that the best way right there to do it? I think so. But I would rather try to get this touching and this touching. So I am going to turn off snap rotation right here, and I am going to start subtly just bringing that forward. So now I'm just going to start rotating this a little bit and a little bit until I see both pieces touching the build plate. Now I can look and I've got blue here and I've got light blue here. So now I know that this is going to be supported, and this is the best part of this. That's it. That's the only thing that's going to be supported on this now. So it used to be underneath the eyelids, in the mouth right here where the bill is going to go, and even on the hair right here. But we were able to remove all of that just by rotating our model in a certain way. And remember when I was talking about all of that plateauing on the top. Let's go ahead and slice this, and now we can see that plateauing is gone and it's coming up to this point right here. So now our layer lines are even going to look nicer. We're just going to have to worry about all of our supports that we're going to ultimately have to add underneath the model. So now I've got this guy. I'm going to go ahead and move him over, and let's bring in some of the other pieces. And I've also got the feet right here, but obviously we are not going to need any supports for these feet because they are printing flat and the angles are perfectly fine. So we don't see any red on this model. So that means we are good. So these feet can just be set aside. Now the next thing is this beak, or the bill. Now if we look at it, we are going to have these support areas underneath here and underneath here. So if I rotate this bill around and I get it to lay flat on this one area, and you can see that it's laying flat right there, Then I'm only going to have to deal with a few areas to be able to support. I've got it right here in the middle, right here, and you can see along this edge right here, it's going to want to add supports. And this is one of those areas that we're going to tell it, no, we don't want supports there because it's not going to be needed. There's not much of an overhang, and I think we're going to be just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to leave that right here, and we'll deal with removing supports from this later in the video. So now we've got these other pieces, and we've really just got to determine what's the best way for us to print this. So what I'm going to do first is look at this, and I can see I'm going to have a lot of supports underneath there, and this isn't going to be a great first layer with just this little bit touching. So I'm going to flip this upside down, and it'll support these edges. So if I go ahead and I come over here to my rotate and I click on this icon right here, this will select the face, and what this does is whatever face I select, it's going to align it flat to the build plate. So this big area right here, I'm just going to click it, and now you can see how this just turned it upside down, and now it's aligned to the build plate. And I can do the same thing on this over here. Let's say if I want this to lay flat, I can just click that, and then you can see how it'll automatically put it right there, even though this might not be the best way, and we'll have to look at this one. But now when we look underneath here, we can see that we're going to need supports all around the edges right here, and that's going to be okay because it's going to be covered up by this hoodie. And then right here, we're going to need a little bit, but looking at it, I don't know if we're going to actually need any. We'll see. So now let's look at this last piece, the hoodie. So how do we want to orient this to be able to get rid of the most supports and make it look good? So if I look here, I want to see, is this too subtle of a gradation, and am I going to have a lot of layer lines right here on the face? Because that's something I don't want. So let me slice this, and let's see what it's going to look like. And when I look at it, I can see, yeah, I'm going to have a lot of those right here and on the arm right here. I don't think this is the best orientation just because of the layer lines. So that means I am going to sacrifice some of this to be able to have more supports in order to get rid of some of these layer lines to make the print look even better. So I am going to go back to prepare. So now I'm going to click on this and go to rotate again, and I'm first going to spin it to where it's directly aligned to me first. Then I'm going to start tilting this up. That way this edge is going to be where my plateauing is, and I can get the rest of this. Now, is this going to be a pretty first layer? No, it's not. Now, am I going to need some more supports than right here? Yes, I absolutely am, because this entire area is going to need a lot more supports to be able to make it stable. And that is where I am going to show you how to add more supports than it's even supposed to have. So now you can see some examples of the ways that we can orient our model in the best way possible to remove as many supports as we can. So the first thing let's tackle is how to remove supports. Let's say that we have a 3D print and it's giving us some supports in areas that we just don't want. And that is honestly pretty easy. So let's jump over to Cura and let me show you how to remove supports from your 3D print. So now we have our models oriented in the way we want them. Now the next thing we have to do is add our supports. So I went ahead and hit add, and I am going to be using tree supports. And I'm also going to have them everywhere, instead of just touching the build plate. Now I'm going to go ahead and slice this, that way we can get an idea of what we're dealing with. So I have my branch angle set to 55 degrees, which is also my support overhang angle. And if you see here, we have some different things that are actually wanting to be supported, and we have some other areas that need supports that do not have them. How do we easily remove supports from areas that have supports? For example, the head right here. Underneath his hair, it's wanting to put a little bit of supports right there, and we don't need that. So let's talk about how to remove supports. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to prepare, and we're going to click our model. and we are going to see there is a tiny little red spot right here that it's trying to support, and we don't want that. Now, all I have to do is come over here and click on the support blocker, or you can hit the letter E. Now I've engaged that, and all I have to do is click on the model in the area that I do not want any supports. So I'm just going to go right here and click on it. So now you're going to see this little cube show up, and this is a support blocker. So anything inside the area of this cube is not going to be printing any supports. So you can see that I have got that little area completely covered. So let's go ahead and reslice it and show you what that looks like. So now we can see there are no supports right there, and we have gotten rid of them. And that is exactly what we wanted to do. Now, the one thing to understand is once we've actually clicked on support blocker right here, every single time we click on the model, it is going to add a support blocker. So if we want all of these support blockers right here, we can do that to ensure that there's going to be no supports whatsoever, even though we know there's not going to be because we don't see any red to show that we need some supports. So then to be able to remove some of these, all you have to do is click on the move tool and then click on those blockers and just hit delete. So I can click on those and hit delete. Now the other nice thing is you can treat this like any other model. And if I turn off uniform scale, I can stretch this box out and change the sizes and dimensions of it to be able to use one blocker to take care of everything, as well as rotate. So I can rotate this around if I wanted to. So just treat this just like any other model, and that's how you can manipulate these support blockers. Now, if you don't want it, once again, you can just hit delete. And if I'm looking through here, I don't need this one and I don't need that one. So that is the only support blocker I needed for this model. So let's jump over to this hoodie. Now I'm going to turn around the back right here, and you can see that it is wanting to put in supports right here on this bottom edge. But when I was looking at it, I don't think I'm going to need any supports. So I am just going to click on here, and then I am going to add in some of these support blockers just like this. And you can see how easy it is to add them in. Now when I slice this, that there are no supports right there, and we are going to be just fine, because when I scrub through here and I watch and how the overhang starts, I don't think we're going to need any supports, and it's going to look just fine as is. So now that we've covered how to remove supports, let's talk about how to add supports. And this is the part that honestly is a little clunky, and I'm not a giant fan of it because of the options we have. But nonetheless, let's get into it. Let me show you how to add supports to your 3D prints. So now let's talk about adding supports. Now looking through this, everything is actually looking pretty good. Like, I'm not going to need to add any supports except one specific area, and that is right here. I am going to need to add supports to this because this is a lot of overhang without having any supports. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to go back to prepare, and I am going to click on the model, then I'm going to use my support blocker, and I am going to just click right here to be able to create a support. Now, one thing that I think is important to mention, when you click on your model, if you look, all of the support blockers are tied to your model. So they're actually parented to it. So you can click on the individual ones and move those around, but when you click on the main model and move it around, all of those little blockers are going to stay with your model. So I'm going to go ahead right now and scale this up. So I am going to scale it widthwise, and then I'm going to go into height. Now I'm going to bring this up, and I want this to be supporting on the inside right here, just like that. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in another support blocker right here. And I'm also going to scale this out and scale this up just a little bit. Now that I have these added, now what I've got to do is turn these into supports to add more supports. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this little icon right here, is per model settings. I'm going to click that, and then over here on this vertical line, I am going to click Print as Support. So then you're going to see this change into these bars and stripes on the block. And I'm going to do the same thing again right here. I'm going to click on that. Then I'm going to click on the Print as Support. Now I can see I'm a little bit off, so I need to move this over just a little bit. And then I'm going to move this up a little bit as well. So now this is going to set flat. So let's go ahead and slice this so we can see what this is going to look like and how it's going to give us even more support than we originally had. So now we can look at our model and you see those blocks being printed as supports, and the supports are these light blue. So if I scrub down through here, now we can see that we are getting some really good support coverage right at the beginning here, where it's just a little sliver of that hoodie. So it's actually giving us a nice strong foundation to be able to print the rest of this. Now, you also noticed in the very beginning, there was nothing printing on the inside here. And now we've got that support on the inside to help print right there. So this is going to be able to help us get a solid 3D print and not have to worry about any failures. All right, real quick, I just have to say thank you. Thank you to all of these amazing people for supporting me on Patreon this month. If you want to be like these awesome people, you will get exclusive access to my private Discord channels where we talk about printing, painting, softwares, and everything else in between. And you'll also be able to see all of my behind-the-scenes content of what I'm working on and what's going on in the workshop. But I just wanted to say thank you guys. Other than that, let's get back to the video. So the last thing I realized is I actually want to print this a lot bigger, and I'm going to be printing this in separate prints in different colors. That way I have minimal painting on this to make it look amazing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scale these up to 200%. And if you notice, when we scale these up, those support blockers actually scale up with it. Like I said, everything is tied to it. So when I scale this up to 200%, you can see all of those support blockers stayed right there. And that is the really nice thing about this. So now I can just separate all of these into different 3D prints, and I don't have to worry about all of the support blockers and supports that I have custom created. So now we know how to orient our model in the proper way. We know how to remove supports, and we know how to add supports. And that's one of the biggest things we need to know. So once we've got all of that down, the next thing is really how do we remove those supports easily? And that is what I'm going to be covering in my upcoming video. I'm going to be talking about how to remove supports easily. So until then, I wish you a great day, and I'll go ahead and see you in this next video over here.